Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And we're back again. This week, a little different sounding. Let's just get it out of the way real quickly.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should have let you take the intro, because the audiophile listeners are going to be like 2 seconds in and be like, "What is this shit? Off, done. I'm out of here."
I'm sure we'll get roasted on the podcast audiophile message boards.
Definitely.
For this one, but
look,
we used to have burps on our show.
That's true. We still do. They just get edited out. But I don't know. I guess just like for those of you out there who are going to be downloading this episode in FLAC, I apologize. There's not much I can do right now. People, our Discord and such, people know that we've been experiencing some technical issues that are a huge pain in my fucking ass right now. So that's where we're at. We're going to get those resolved eventually. This is not a permanent setup. So, pardon our dust. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyways, Niall, I find myself once again turning to the rich history of UFOs.
Okay.
How
far back we going? What kind of era are we talking?
This is the 70s, Niall, which there's definitely good stuff in the 80s, but I feel like the 70s is where we start to see the true decline of the really, really strange cases of UFOs. There's obviously a lot of the 50s to 60s abductee stuff. A lot of strange stuff from the 50s through the 60s. 70s, you still get a lot of that weird flavor, but you can tell with the sort of gears of history shifting, so too does the UFO experience. The phenomenon, interestingly enough, seems to run parallel to our social experiences. That's my takeaway with doing this for however long we've been doing it. But I think the thing that keeps these stories especially fresh for me is every once in a while I'm like, oh, right, these very weird and singular experiences with UFOs, they're not just taking place in the United States, right? It shows up elsewhere. And I found one that I thought was very interesting. And I had to do one of my favorite things that I get to do with stuff like this is just really push the limits of search engines, which, kind of all suck now. They're just Google's obviously just like a total trash
AI cesspool. Yeah.
It just really sucks now. It doesn't even beyond just the AI stuff. It doesn't serve you up the stuff you want. It serves you up crap. DuckDuckGo, maybe what we could do sometimes is just really rank the search engines that are available and just let the people know, like, hey, there's this cool, I forget the one that I sent you, but there's the one that was like specifically looking for stuff that was like forgotten, like websites
Yeah.
that still exist but have been sort of forgotten by time. The people don't update it, but um, things like that. There's some cool search engines out there. I'm a DuckDuckGo guy myself. At this
That's my
point,
main. Yeah.
yeah, you main DuckDuckGo as well.
I do.
Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Um, so I had sort of a jumping off point. That I also follow a lot of accounts in different social media sites that will share information, and from that information I'm able to find different sources. This is the problem that, we talk a lot about how weird it is to research this stuff if you don't have access to direct access to books like immediately, or you don't have access to newspaper archives immediately and things like that. So then you end up hunting this stuff down. And I was able to hunt down a couple different UFO researchers who got their hands on this case, and you have the surface articles of like, here's the story that everybody knows, and then you can drill down into these more interesting tidbits. And what I found with this one, it actually reminded me of the story from a number of months ago, where you have this guy's experience out in a field in the UK somewhere, and it kind of ends with like, well, maybe he was hoaxing it and all this stuff. But the UFO investigators, for whatever reason, their part of their story doesn't get told in most of the places that you would find articles online about it, where the UFO researchers are getting their audio recordings of sessions, like meeting on the case, hijacked by a third party, and like messages are put into their tape recorders and stuff. If you remember that one, Niall. So that part of the story just isn't online really. You have to go searching for it. So I found some stuff that you had to kind of dig a little further to find, and I always find that interesting, like why these parts of the story get left out, because they seem pretty important to the story. Anyways, I've beaten around the bush enough here. And speaking of the bush, let's head down to Australia. That's what they call it, right?
Hell yeah.
They go outside. They're like, we're going to go to the bush. We're going to go out to the bush, I think.
Yeah, I think that's like the wilderness of Australia.
We're going to go throw some shrimp on the Barbie out in the bush, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Australia, so I apologize, Australians who are listening, if this was offensive. I didn't mean it. So, check this out. We're going to talk about the UFO sighting and the bizarre close encounters of a woman named Maureen Puddy.
Okay.
So, Maureen Puddy is from Victoria, Australia, or at least that's where this story takes place. The story was brought to light to the UFO community of Australia by a researcher named Judith McGee. And actually, one of the things that I found was an old recording of Judith McGee at a talk, at some sort of UFO talk about this story, where, again, I discovered there was more to the story than what the internet would suggest. So, Judith McGee, it's 1972. McGee is secretary of the Victoria UFO Research Society at the time, and she happened to be listening to the radio one day when she heard a woman speak about her strange UFO experience, and that woman's name was Maureen Puddy. And as I understand it, after her first UFO encounter, Puddy would begin a correspondence with McGee. And yes, I did say first encounter, because in McGee's article on the story, this is published in the Flying Saucer Review, the November-December 1972 issue, she makes a point to refer to Puddy as a repeater. And she has multiple encounters with what is presumably the same UFO, as well as some really weird stuff that seems to be related to that UFO that happens after the main story. So, in the article, which is titled UFO Over Moraduck Road, the editor points out that Dr. J. Allen Hynek wrote about repeat experiences in his book, The UFO Experience. The repeater thing, not just a Fugazi album or song.
Yeah, I was going to
It's an
say,
album,
is that?
right?
Yeah, it was. So it was either a
Repeater plus,
EP originally, but then Repeater plus
yeah,
3 is the
plus
CD
3.
release. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Maureen Puddy is a 1, 2, 3 repeater. Uh, so, uh, McGee writes in this article, sorry, I was saying Hynek wrote in the UFO Experience. He sort of concludes that these kinds of reports can be excluded from further consideration, and I think the idea here is that one-time offender UFO experience is like, okay, that's anomalous and weird. The more encounters you have, the more suspect it becomes. I guess for him, I actually don't know. I haven't read the UFO experience. I have a different book from Hynek, but I haven't read the UFO experience, and I really should. But my assumption is that the more times you encounter a UFO, the less believable your story becomes, because it starts to seem like there's like a narrative sort of being weaved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Hynek was anticipating special little boy syndrome in like, you know, the 60s or 70s or whatever the fuck. Like that's something that we talk about all the time, where if you've had UFO encounters all throughout your life,
yes,
you sound way less realistic than someone who just had a one-time encounter.
Yes, to be clear, special little boy syndrome, or special little girl syndrome in this case. You are our whole idea with that is that you become the center of attention of this important narrative. You're the hero of this story, right? And it starts to sound more fictional. It starts to cause you, as the person hearing the story, to question why does this revolve around you so much. And I think that's sort of what's being implied by Hynek saying we don't really have to pay attention to the repeater stories. But of course, this is sort of a subject of contention in the UFO community, and I think especially in this encounter, I'm not ready to say that this story is some, I'm not necessarily ready to say, oh well, Maureen Puddy experienced a alien from space, right? Like I think something happened here. I don't know what. This is one of those stories where I came away going like, well, don't know what happened here, but sure was weird. So Puddy's story, relayed through McGee, begins by explaining that Puddy's 7-year-old son had been at the school library when a shelf fell on him and injured his leg. It caused a leg injury that was bad enough that he got a helicopter ride to a hospital just north of Melbourne. So, Mrs. Puddy's, freaked out. Her son's injured. And so it's July 5th, 1972, and Puddy is driving home, and she's on this road called Moraduck Road, which is, as I understand it, pretty remote. Not a lot of traffic on this road. You don't see people. You know how, like, you can sort of... I think about this a lot where, you're on the highway, there's a bunch of people there, but then when I drive to, my parents' place, which is kind of remote, there's certain stretches of the road where it's like there's nobody here for half the time, and then you maybe see 1 or 2 people on your travels. And I think that's the kind of road we're talking about here. It's about I'm
a little disappointed that the aliens weren't involved with the bookcase falling over. I think I was really hoping that like they were the aliens like pushed over this bookshelf to like cause this experience. But I guess that would make her an immediate repeater.
Yeah, and I don't. So there's nothing explicit in the story to tell you that the aliens are involved with the bookcase. But what I find interesting is, at least for 2 of these accounts, it happens like when she is en route away or from the hospital that her son is at. So you could loosely say like, oh, the aliens show up when she's, going to visit her son who had this injury. So maybe and these aliens might be psychic, by the way, surprising no one. But maybe they were sort of like, this was the scale tipper, like we need her in this spot. So let's throw a bookshelf on her son.
Let's injure her son just enough that he has to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Which will allow her to drive this lonely country road in the middle of the night, and witness our brilliance. You know,
you never
It's a foolproof plan.
It's an interesting plan. So this is 35 miles southeast of Melbourne, on this sort of desolate road. And as she's driving, she notices that there is this blue light that's sort of above and behind her car. And, again, this thing, when her son was injured, he was taken to a hospital by helicopter. And so she's like, oh, that light, it sort of looks like a helicopter maybe. So I'm going to get out of my car and check it out, because this light seems to be flying pretty low behind her. And what I find sort of funny is she sort of seems to, when she talks about this story, she almost makes it sound like, oh, the helicopters were coming because they needed to tell me something.
Yeah, she's getting buzzed by the helicopter so she could get talked to. Yeah.
Right.
You forgot your bill.
Yeah, well, it's like, the idea is just kind of funny, because it's just like, hold up. We forgot one thing. We're flying down to, hold up a second. But, nobody has cell phones at the time. So how else are they going to reach her? Are they going to, they couldn't possibly wait for her to get home and they could ring her up on her telephone at home or anything. But, this thing's flying low. And, the thing that she doesn't realize at first, though, is even though this thing is helicopter-like to her initial impression of it, it's not making any noise. And helicopters make noise.
They are known to do that, yes.
They do make noise. So she stops her car and gets out on the side of the road. And she is shocked by what she sees. So I'm going to read from the article here. A huge object was hovering above and completely overlapping the road at both sides, at an altitude of just over that of 2 telegraph poles. And there were telegraph poles at the side of the road to enable her to make this comparison. In fact, Mrs. Puddy said that if the UFO had come straight down to land, it would have struck the poles. This made possible an estimate of the size of the object, for the road surface itself is 24 feet wide, to which one must add the width of the nature strips on either side up to the poles. Mrs. Puddy feels that the UFO was at least 100 feet in diameter. Now, notably, that when she reports this to the media, to the press, she initially tells them an estimate of 50 feet in diameter. But as the story sort of gets worked on by these UFO researchers, she's starting to say closer to 100 feet.
Well, maybe the first time they misquoted her and thought that she was saying radius,
I guess it's possible. But it does say specifically in this article by McGee that this was originally estimated 50 feet, now is 100 feet. So it goes on to say, the UFO was shaped like 2 huge saucers, one inverted on top of the other, with a smooth surface, no joins, welds, seams, or rivets, no windows, doors, or portholes, and no wheels. So you have to picture 2 sort of, saucers cupped on top of each other like that. This great object was radiating a brilliant blue light all around, not in beams, but in an intense glow, so the whole object is glowing. There's no sign of movement, no wobbling or rotating, but there was a faint humming noise. Her eyes must have registered all these details in the time it takes for idle curiosity to turn into terror. She stumbled back into her car and drove off as fast as she could. The experience became a nightmare when she realized that the object was staying in its position above and behind the car. So as she drives off, this thing follows her. No matter how fast she drove, the object followed her, maintaining the same position. Then suddenly the nightmare passed. Aware that the blue glow was no longer with her, Mrs. Puddy barely had time to see a light streaking away in the opposite direction. This chase lasted about 8 miles. The witness reported the incident to the police. So she immediately goes to the police from here. And then she tells the members of her family. And she also tells a couple friends. And a number of these people treat it as a joke and don't take her seriously. And she ends up just not saying anything about this case for 3 weeks. Which this is actually a thing that happens at least twice in the story, where she tells somebody about it in some capacity and then gets made fun of and then shuts up for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the thing that is always strange with UFO stuff. Like, I totally get the like public shame aspect, where like, oh yeah, if I said it and got a bad reaction, I would probably shut up about it too, you know?
Yeah, she doesn't, give up here, but I imagine the fact that she got this joking reaction didn't help her feel comfortable about reporting it. But the other thing that I find and we'll get to this, but the other thing that I find interesting about this case is that she doesn't want to be visited by this UFO again. She's afraid of it. I think that you'll find that there are a lot more cases that feel less legitimate, where people are sort of, excited or enticed by the experience. I'm always interested in the people who there is a lot of fear. I don't want to deny that, but I think it's interesting that she very explicitly is like, I don't want anything to do with this thing because it's scary. It's interesting. That being said, she does give a talk at a UFO conference, but
okay.
But anyways, now I'm not actually totally sure how this little segment I have here enters the story, because at least I'm not sure how it works from McGee's perspective, because this isn't in her original article from the Flying Saucer Review, but she does talk about it in one of her talks later on. But so between this first encounter and the second encounter we're going to get to very shortly, Puddy has another strange experience that's not on the record in many of these articles, because I think people are mostly referencing the Flying Saucer Review. So she has this weird experience. This is the night before her second UFO experience. She's at home with her husband, who happens to, I think he is in a wheelchair, so he's not, ambulatory. And she's at home with her husband and her daughter, who I think is like 5 years old. A son who's 7 years old is in the hospital at this point. And she suddenly hears a voice calling out her name, Maureen. She hears a voice saying her name, and she asks her family about the voice, but nobody else has heard anything. They don't know what she's talking about. She starts looking around, going from room to room, looking for the source of this voice. She steps outside. She doesn't find anything. And she makes the conclusion that this voice is in her mind. And the other thing that's interesting about it is she says that it's a distinctly human-sounding voice. So she just hears this voice off and on throughout the night. She gets in bed that night. It continues to talk to her and say her name. And then the next day, she has her second encounter with the UFO.
So was it just saying her name the entire time?
Yeah.
That would be so annoying after a while. Like, there's just this thing that no one else can hear that just occasionally says your name in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, it would scare you for a while, but I do think over a long period of time, I would just get very annoyed.
It is an interesting thought of like, at what point, how many times can we map out some sort of graph here that's like, how many times does it have to be happening before you're just like, first time, oh, that's terrifying. You're like, what the fuck? Oh my God, what's talking to me? Second time, oh God, leave me alone. What's happening? Third time, right. Okay. So I get it now. I get what's going on here.
I think it could stay scary for maybe the first 5. But as you creep closer to 10, you start just going,
diminishing
returns. Is this all this is? Like, is this just all you can do?
Yeah. It definitely, you are probably right that at a certain point it does transform to annoyance. So, second encounter. This is Tuesday, July 25th, 1972. And she's actually driving home. I believe the town that she lives in is called Rye, which is in Victoria, which I don't know how all that stuff works. The state of Victoria in Australia, whatever. So she's going home to Rye. She had just visited her son at the hospital. And as she's headed home, about the same time as her first encounter, about the same place on Moraduck Road, she then realizes the blue ball of light is back. And she thinks to herself, oh, hell no, not again. And it, it's noted in the article by McGee that, like I said, she doesn't want anything to do with this. She didn't want to have to experience this again. So because she wants to get away from this thing that's following her, instead of stopping to check it out, because she now knows it's not a helicopter, she puts the pedal to the metal. She starts to fucking floor it on Moraduck Road to get away from it, to see if she can escape it. The scary thing is it seems to not be possible to escape the blue orb of light. It follows her again, and she can't drive fast enough to get away from it. And as she's trying to get away from it, suddenly the engine cuts out, she loses control of the steering, and the car swings off to the side of the road and slows to a halt. And now I'm going to read from the article. It had been a dark, clear night, yet now the car, the road and verges, and the surrounding trees and bushes were bathed in a blue light. A terrified Mrs. Puddy sat motionless, bending forward and gripping the steering wheel. She states that she felt as if she was in a vacuum. She peered upwards through the windscreen and saw part of the rim of a glowing object hanging in the air above her car. At this point, she suddenly became aware of a voice, not audible, but as if in her head or mind, saying, "All your tests will be negative." There's a pause, and then it says, "Tell media, do not panic. We mean you no harm." And then another pause, and then it says, "You now have control." And as soon as it says that, the vacuum effect that's surrounding her, it just dissipates suddenly, and the car engine restarts. So now she's really freaked out and getting a little panicky, and she drives away from the spot as fast as she can. This thing flies off, and she goes to the police again. And the police are like, the article's like the police are agitated with her, which I don't know if it's just the fact that they're receiving a weird UFO story, or if they're just like, this fucking lady again. God damn it. But she's sort of shaken up, and she tells them everything, and the police determine, she's lucid, and because of that, they say, okay, well, something happened here. We don't know what, but clearly something weird happened. And so they then, through the police, she then is able to reach out to the Royal Australian Air Force. So the RAAF is now informed of her experiences, and she tells them about these messages that the thing sent her. And she doesn't have any idea what the psychic message meant when it referred to her tests, because she hadn't had any sort of personal, I first of all, my mind immediately when I read that was like, oh, well, is it referring to her son, right? Because again,
yeah, that's where I went too.
Both of the UFO experiences involve her coming away from this hospital where her son is, but also she makes note, I didn't have any medical tests being done. There was no tests. There was nothing, whatever they're referring to, I don't know what it is. So there's also this weird thing where the article says this: as for the second message, the word media was not one that she would use, although she had been aware vaguely that it meant instruments of mass communication like broadcasting and newspapers. The implication of the final message was obvious enough to her for from that moment she was able to take control once again of her car. So I don't quite know what to make of this whole she doesn't use the term media thing.
Yeah.
I think what is meant to be sort of implied by this little tidbit here is that this thing is communicating to her through its understanding of which is media, but she doesn't use that term. So clearly this is some other entity that's trying to communicate with her. And even though she doesn't use the word like that, she understood what it meant. You know, so this is clearly some entity. It almost is like a lending of credibility here, right? Where this is not coming from her, right? This is another entity communicating with her. This is legitimate, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a weak justification for that. Like, you know, like I don't think it actually lends that much credibility to it, but I do get what they're saying here. It's just kind of funny to like, no, it couldn't be that she couldn't be making this up because she doesn't use that word that way.
Right. And the article doesn't say that explicitly. I think that's sort of the idea, but at the same time, it's such a weird small detail that I'm like, why would you would you just make that up? Why would that be your thing to suggest credibility, right? Like, so it's weird enough that I'm like, I don't even know whether this would be just some made up thing. I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's odd. So
it's like a Rorschach test. Like you can read anything into that detail you want, and it makes some sense. It's like it could make it better, worse, or indifferent.
Now, this is one of the most interesting parts to me, because these messages that are delivered to her, she describes it as being kind of like a telepathy. But she also says she doesn't really know anything about that, and that just seems to be what it was to her. But she's not familiar with the subject of telepathy. She doesn't know about this stuff. She doesn't know about psychic powers. And I really like this little bit here that says, she said it was as if the messages were coming to her in a foreign tongue that translated itself into English, but of a kind that she and people like her would not speak. So it's, I think, beyond just the whole credibility thing here of like, this is some other thing. This is definitely some other thing. She is also suggesting that this is an alien attempting to do human stuff, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's sort of what it sounds like. And I also really like this little bit here where she basically says, I didn't see any way for this UFO. There was no noticeable way for, no portholes, no door, nothing to suggest that this thing opened up. And so she suggests maybe it was not actually, there could have been something aboard the craft, but she also says maybe it was actually a remotely controlled craft of some kind. And the word she uses to describe this is that it was computerized. And this is her interpretation of a possible interpretation, because she didn't observe any way to enter or exit the craft or see out of it or anything.
Yeah.
Now, she says that she was in this vacuum state for about 5 minutes. And we'll get to that detail in a minute, which I thought was also funny. But here's a little note on how Puddy's car restarts after the UFO released her, because this is actually an editorial note that was in the article about the editor's like, you said that her car restarted, but what did you mean by that? Can you clarify by that? Hopefully McGee can clarify this. And McGee does clarify in her talk. It starts up again suddenly and without her direct input. It was as if the electronics of her vehicle had been put on pause in the presence of the UFO. The article, the editor's like, do you mean that she like now could restart it manually with her, her key in the ignition or something? Or no, it was like paused by the UFO. And now, of course, this thing had sent her a psychic message. So Yeah, she talks to the RAAF. Like I said, they tell her that it couldn't have been an aircraft that they knew about because there had been none in the area at the time of her encounter. And this is the part that I also find I really like. This is interesting. They tell her, please keep this story to yourself. Don't go to the media and report it because we want to avoid mass panic if possible. Like if people start panicking over this weird situation, we don't want to have to get involved.
Right.
Which, that's a pretty common MO with these military and government things. We don't want mass panic from UFOs. But because Puddy is so scared of this thing visiting her again, and the fact that its psychic message to her was tell the media about us, she thinks to herself, if this thing wants me to do that, maybe it will leave me alone if I do it.
Sure.
And so she does. She ignores what the RAAF asked her to do, and she does go to the media to report her story. So Puddy makes a phone call to the television station Channel Zero and gets set up for interviews. And McGee makes an interesting note here, which is that UFOs and aliens were very much in the air at the time. People were interested in that stuff. It was talked about. And coming up soon on Channel Zero was going to be an airing of the Chariots of the Gods movie, which I think you and I watched together forever ago.
Yep.
And so when she was interviewed, they took her segment and they air it right after the airing of Chariots of the Gods. So that's very synergistic, great programming synergy.
Yeah. That's some primo placement for her, I gotta say.
Yeah. But then Puddy also reaches out to channels 7 and 9 to try and tell her story. And apparently, those people just laughed her out of the place. And so because of that, she once again is like, okay, I'm not reaching out to people about this. Now, in McGee's article, she talks about how on August 24th, 1972, there's an article published in the Australasian Post, and it reports on this interview with her. And they point out some stuff in the article that's kind of interesting. So they talk about how the area that she lives in is pretty well populated, but like I said before, stretches of this particular road can be quite desolate. They talk about how traffic after dusk specifically, they say here, the intervals between passing cars can be as long as 5 or even 10 minutes. So they highlight this, and then they also make this note of like, Mrs. Puddy, she says she was in the vacuum state for about 5 minutes. But remember, dear reader, that 5 minutes is sort of a figure of speech, which can be used to describe how time is sort of dragging. The period could have been much shorter than 5 minutes. They also...
Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's like, I get the point that they're making, but I also find that I think 5 minutes is an interesting segment of time, because I feel like when you get paralyzed, by a UFO, you will have this sense of unreality and this sense of displacement in time. I don't like, she doesn't have missing time or any of the classic hallmarks like that, and she is able to estimate 5 minutes I'm frozen as this thing psychically talks to me. It's just a bit different, right? Like,
it's slightly different hallmarks than a lot of the normal UFO encounters.
Yeah. The other thing that
none of this was found out through hypnotic regression or anything. We didn't have any of that involved.
No, I did not find anything about hypnotic regression. This is her actively getting in contact with people who are interested, and people who aren't interested, obviously, like the other channels. Another thing brought up by this article in the Post was, if this UFO is hovering all bright and blue, why wasn't it seen from a distance? Like, did other people see this? And, Puddy says this, quote, "It might have been. It could have been seen by people who wondered what it was without considering it important enough to bother about. If it was there very briefly, and this is a distinct possibility, accepting the idea that the 5 minutes was a gross overestimate, although an honest assessment of the situation as experienced, there could have been others in the surrounding country who glimpsed the light in the sky and promptly forgot it when it disappeared. So the point being is like, yeah, maybe, but this thing sort of was abrupt, and maybe people didn't make too much note of it because it didn't seem that anomalous, maybe. But Ken Cauley in the Australian Post then says, well, hang on, here's some interesting stuff to add to this. And here's how these bits of this information is presented in his article. It says this. At about 10 o'clock on the night of July 25th, which puts it at roughly 3/4 of an hour after what Mrs. Puddy says happened on the Moraduck Road, a young man came out into a street after a dental appointment at Mount Waverley, a southeastern suburb of outer Melbourne. Can I just say, that's insane to have a 10 o'clock dentist appointment. That's like an ungodly hour to be getting teeth work done.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess getting it out of the way is one thing, but it does seem like I would rather do that a little later in the day.
It feels like an evil time to have somebody doing dental work, you know?
Yeah.
It's like what I imagine the serial killer dentist horror movie guy, that he's like, I do my appointments at 10 p.m., you know?
Yeah.
We're closer to the witching hour than we're not. I don't know.
Yeah, like it is like you're gonna go to your dentist after dark, and it's like that does feel a little, you know, maybe they're a little looser with the gas, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever seen? This is so stupid. Have you ever seen the fucking? I want to say like an Instagram or Facebook screenshot of the guy who's like the only nude barber experience in the area.
No,
where it's like a fucking guy who's just fully nude and trims people's hair, I guess. So maybe the dentist experience after dark is your dentist is nude the whole time that they're in your mouth. Could be a...
Yeah, and that's the best way to say that.
I chose my words carefully.
Yeah.
So, dentist after dark, whatever. I don't need to get sidetracked by that anymore. This young man comes out in the street after his dental appointment. He was Maris Ezergalis, Australian-born of Latvian parents, 21, a junior engineering executive in a business established by his father. By training and outlook, Mr. Ezergalis is a practical man, a realist. As such, he is not in general terms susceptible to irrational happenings. To add to his feet-on-the-ground attitude to what he sees is the fact that he is a qualified air pilot licensed to fly commercially. And what did he see on July 25th? Something that didn't quite make sense to him. A flash of blue light from the sky, and when he looked up, a meteor trail, but an unusually broad one, traveling horizontally. Just a streak of light and it was gone, but it left him wondering. It was the horizontal path that bothered him. Told about what Mrs. Puddy says she saw on the Moraduck Road a short time before, he is interested but non-committal and still wondering. And then in parentheticals. Mrs. Puddy reacted strongly when told about what Mr. Ezergalis saw. That's the way it looked when it took off the first time I saw it, she said. A wide streak of light and then nothing. Then there was the experience of Mr. and Mrs. Beale, who live on Main Ridge Rye. An unusual light in the sky, looking west from their home. This would have placed it in the direction of the place described by Maureen Puddy, caught Mr. Beale's attention and intrigued him to the point of getting some binoculars and dousing the house lights. It was too far away to identify with certainty, but there was something going on in the sky, something unlike anything we'd seen before, Mrs. Beale told us. And this on the night of July 25th at some time after 9 o'clock. But the one man Mrs. Puddy has been hoping to catch up with hadn't come forward up to the time this magazine went to press. As she was approaching the railway crossing where Moraduck Road crosses the railway line to Mornington, on that Tuesday night, she saw a man with what she at first thought was a bicycle. It turned out that the man was walking, carrying a flashlight and leading a cow. She passed him, traveling in the opposite direction, and started up the gentle slope to where the road dips before climbing again. Why didn't he come back to see what it was, she asks. He must have seen it. Perhaps he did, but after all, he was walking away from it and would have been a mile or so from her when Mrs. Puddy says the UFO came down over her car. Chances are he didn't see anything or anything that caught his attention for long enough to register. Or if he reads this, perhaps he'll remember and say so. Mrs. Puddy says she won't drive along that road again at night unless she has company. One thing emerges clearly from the whole affair. Maureen Puddy once scoffed at the idea of flying saucers. Now she doesn't.
All right. So did that bicycle boy ever come forward?
I didn't find anything about bicycle boy coming forward about UFOs, unfortunately. So as of the issue of the Flying Saucer Review that we have with McGee's writing, this is where the story ended. However, Puddy and McGee would remain in contact with one another, and Puddy was also in contact with two other Melbourne-based researchers, Gary Little and Bill Stapleton. This next part of the story I was able to find through the blog Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, written by Keith Blasterfield. And Blasterfield is a prolific researcher, great resource, especially when it comes to cases from Australia. The blog, as well as his entries on the website project1947.com, are, by my impression, invaluable accounts of UFO cases. It's one of those old heads that's just keeping track of this stuff, and it's really cool. So, in an article written by Blasterfield for the International UFO Reporter titled Present at the Abduction, we get to learn about the further experiences of Maureen Puddy. So this is where shit gets really strange.
Yeah, so we got even more stuff going on. Okay.
Yes, this is the stuff that doesn't get talked about as much online. So here's what it says. On or about February 22nd, 1973, Puddy once again heard a voice calling her first name all night long. In the morning, she felt an eerie presence around the house, and she caught a message which instructed her to go back to the meeting place. She telephoned Little and Stapleton, but neither answered his phone, so she phoned the Victorian UFO Research Society, and two members agreed to meet her at the spot where her car had stopped of its own accord. And one of the members, by the way, is McGee. As I understand it.
Okay.
On the way alone to the spot, an entity suddenly appeared in the car's front passenger seat. Puddy almost crashed her car in surprise. The entity had long blonde hair and wore a white ski suit.
Okay.
The suit was tucked in at the wrists and went over his feet. Abruptly, the man then disappeared. When she arrived at the spot, the two investigators, Judith McGee and Paul Norman, sat in her car. Suddenly, she saw the same man appear just outside the vehicle. Neither McGee nor Norman saw anything unusual. So this is what makes this story especially as weird. It's like, and actually this is one of the things that Blasterfield talks about in this article, where it's like, people don't witness UFO abductions and things like that with other people present who don't experience the abduction. This is something that I think we've talked about on other episodes too, where it's like, it's very rare to find a situation where somebody sees another person experience a UFO or alien related thing, right?
Yeah.
But apparently it does happen. So she's in the car with these two, and she sees something and they don't see it.
Yeah, the whole like guy appearing in her passenger seat thing feels like it could be one of those things where, you know, he's like having to hold control of his invisibility fucking powers and like slips for a second and has to like recover.
Yeah.
I like how weird that is, where it's like the guy's just talking into her brain for multiple nights and then just accidentally like slips and is like, oh shit, no, I'm right here. He's staying around.
I would have loved if the story included some detail of like he fumbled with the device and promptly disappeared again. Like he's like, oh, fuck. Beep, beep, beep. Like it's setting it up to set him invisible again. But so the story goes on and says Puddy says that the man was beckoning her to join him outside the car, but she refused to get out. Suddenly, according to the others present, Puddy fainted. She commenced a verbal account while in this state of apparent unconsciousness. She related that she was in a round room somewhere. It was lit, but there was no visible source of illumination. This scene
it was lit.
This scene was indistinguishable from the consensus reality that we call real life. The man appeared in the room in which a mushroom-shaped object rose from the floor. This vise was stemmed with a broad domed top. There appeared to be an inner hemisphere wobbling around, and it was covered with what looked like hieroglyphics. The man directed her to describe what she was seeing, and she did so as McGee and Norman listened. She could see no doors or windows in this room, and this fact frightened her. She started to cry, then woke, still in the car, with tears in her eyes, and said she could not remember what had just occurred. The investigators then filled her in on what had happened. So there is something extra surreal to me about a person experiencing what seems to be a UFO abduction event, but they don't leave their body. They don't leave, or at least not physically, right?
Yeah, it's like an astral projection type abduction.
It's like
they snatched her soul.
It's like a mental or spiritual hijacking, which is a really special idea to me. It's very, very interesting because there's so few cases that feel like this, and I'm just fascinated by it, I guess. So it goes on to say, about a week later, she was driving with her son, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. All of a sudden, the same man appeared between them. Outside, it was raining and visibility was poor, yet while the man was there, the scene in front of the car cleared abnormally, and Puddy could see for kilometers. The moment the man disappeared, the rain and clouds came back.
Weird. Okay. So he's like a reality-altering effect, kind of. Okay.
It's very strange. So this article here ends with, all who interviewed Maureen Puddy thought her to be a normal, healthy individual. The entire series of events perplexed her, and she got nothing but ridicule from persons for reporting the episodes. Still, no one could ever describe her as anything other than, in her words, an average housewife. 10 years later, when I spoke with her, she insisted the experiences were real.
It almost has this weird, it almost feels like with this guy appearing, it almost feels like a time slip thing. Like, it almost feels like either he slipped into her reality or she slipped into his, it has that kind of vibe.
It's interesting you went there because my mind instantly went to like interdimensionality and like Jacques Vallée Passport to Magonia shit, like trickster entity, interdimensional beings. That's where my mind went. But equally valid ideas. We don't know what happened here. It's a very, very strange story. It's interesting. Like, I find it interesting too. Again, that her experience of a UFO and a psychic communication, that's mostly what you find about her story. You don't find this information about the strange, invisible, disappearing, reappearing man and this mental abduction. You don't find that story as readily online. You kind of have to look for it.
So in the main version, is there even any psychic stuff? Because I'm trying to remember if there's any psychic encounter in the...
It beams the message to her about telling the media and how her tests will be, good or whatever. So, she has one. But the thing is, if you think about it, the acceptable... I don't necessarily like this word, but you'll know what I mean. The acceptable tropes of a UFO experience are certain things. And psychic communication is one of those things. Like, if you're going to tell a story about interacting with UFOs, psychic communication is sort of like, it doesn't come as any surprise, right?
It's like having explosions in your action movie.
Yes, but having two UFO researchers in the car with you as you are mentally abducted, there is something so surreal and different about that it just, I wonder if it just slips through the cracks because people don't know what to do with it. I don't know. But so I want to just tell you this. There's this sort of, I wrote in my notes, I described it as a tragic door stopper on this story, which is that there are some articles online that will suggest or imply or draw a relationship to this idea that maybe Maureen Puddy was schizophrenic.
Okay.
And it makes sense on its face, I guess, but I found nothing in the articles and talks from researchers or anything in the actual writing on this woman and her experiences to suggest that this was the case. I also couldn't find any information on Puddy herself after these events concluded, really. So I have no idea what happened to her or if she's even still alive. But to the schizophrenic implications, which is, again, it's a thing that I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it because it gets brought up in these articles sometimes. Personally, I think it's a bit cheap to make this baseless like assumption or like suggest a relationship about Puddy's mental health like that. It feels like a very base skeptical impulse to explain away a strange event that we will never get the answers to, because this is, it's a, quote unquote, it's a cold case. We don't know.
Yeah.
But that's Maureen Puddy. This is another one of those stories where I'm going to maybe dig a little on names of people mentioned here. Like, I know Blasterfield, I think, is still around because I was looking at his blog, and hey, if you like UFO stuff, great guy to read from is Blasterfield. He talks about a lot of stuff over the years.
Is he mostly focused on Australia, or is he worldwide?
I think he's mostly focused on Australia, but I do think he talks about worldwide stuff. But he was, when I went to his page on Project 1947, he was specifically cataloging Australian cases. So,
hell yeah.
But
cool.
I still think like he seems very knowledgeable and well researched. So, maybe I'll like see if I can reach out to somebody to see if I can find out what happened to Maureen Puddy, because like at a certain point the story ends and there's nothing more to be said about her, and I just would be curious, is she still alive? Like, how's she doing? I assume if she had more experiences that would have come up in an article somewhere, but I didn't find anything. So that's Maureen Puddy.
All right.
Pretty cool story. Pretty fascinating.
She got dropped in. Yeah.
Yeah. Niall.
Yeah.
Are you ready for a big question?
Oh, I'm so ready.
Okay. If you were to be tormented by an alien entity that could pop in and out of your life at will, what do you think that entity would look like?
I see. Maybe I'm a traditionalist, but my brain immediately went to the Great Gazoo.
Right. We
don't know
referenced the Great Gazoo a lot.
I know
show.
it's legitimately one of my earliest reference points for aliens was watching Flintstones reruns, and like it so especially like it's that and Mr. Mxyzptlk, which is like they kind of have a similar energy to them. So if I think of an alien popping in and out of my life and tormenting me, those two definitely come to mind, even though I think Mxyzptlk is an interdimensional being or whatever the fuck.
I guess what I'm trying to drive at, first of all, do the kids even know about the Great Gazoo? Like, do kids even know about that anymore?
I don't know. Is that a touch point still? Like, because Flintstones, I don't think, the last Flintstones things that I know about was the fucking comic, and that was like a decade ago. So I don't know if that do Hanna-Barbera cartoons still get reruns?
I think here's the thing. I think you have to seek them out. I think you have to like subscribe to Boomerang or something like that. I don't even know if I don't watch TV anymore, so I don't know if Cartoon Network is still like rerunning those cartoons at 6 a.m. on, Friday mornings like they used to or whatever. But it just feels to me like the Flintstones is one of those things that like give it another couple decades and it will have just disappeared from the cultural consciousness.
I guess 6 seasons of the 6 seasons of the Flintstones are streaming on Hulu currently. So,
but like you have to want that, right? You have to.
Yeah, you have to. You have to opt in. You can't just like stumble upon it on a Saturday morning like I used to.
I don't think any Zoomers are going like, sheesh, no cap. Flintstones are what do they say?
Flintstones are bay.
Flintstones are bay. Oh, I was gonna say based or whatever. Honestly, they would probably like, oh, Flintstones are Sag. It's not Skibbity. I don't think they do Skibbity anymore. I don't know what the youth. I don't know. I have no idea what they're into these days. But here's what I'm trying to drive at, Niall. I'm talking about you. What is the entity that appears before you to torment you?
Yeah.
Because the Great Gazoo is generic. He could torment anybody. I'm saying your personal alien entity demon on your shoulder.
I mean, I guess if we're gonna go for like trying to legitimately like fuck me up, there's a very obvious answer.
That I know the answer to that one. I want let's not say spider.
Yeah. we'll avoid that.
I'm gonna make you work for this big question.
Yeah, there you go. So I think
would it help if I told you what I think mine would be?
Yeah, sure.
Mine is most definitely an Adam Sandler entity who is very aware of everything I've said about him on this show, and he's dressed like that rapper who did the Thrift Shop song. Macklemore. He's dressed like Macklemore. But he has like the sunglasses from it's Adam Sandler. He has the glasses that he wears in Uncut Gems, and he's doing like the most Adam Sandler-y voice. So he's like, "Oh, I know what you said about me." That's kind of what I'm picturing, and he would show up and like crack jokes about like he would sing the Hanukkah song or whatever to me.
Yeah,
or like quote,
you just start
Crazy Nights.
Yeah, I was gonna say he starts just doing the full script to 8 Crazy Nights.
Yeah, it'd be movie script, but it's 8 Crazy Nights for me only.
Yeah. Okay. Then like I think it would be. This is one of those things. I think this has been referenced. I think this is technically lore for the podcast. Okay. I have an unreasonable distaste for the song "Hit Me with Your Best Shot" by Pat Benatar.
Okay.
So I think it would be like Pat Benatar in the music video for "Hit Me with Your Best Shot," just like popping into my life to like serenade me, and I truly don't know why. There's nothing wrong with that song objectively. Like I wish I could tell. I wish I had. I wish it was playing when I got in a car accident or something. Like I wish there was a reason, but yeah, it just is. You. It's just this thing. Like I cannot stand that song. I used to like there. It legitimately. It was on Guitar Hero 2, and it held me up from progressing in the game for a while because I had to beat it to move on, and I just didn't want to play it. So I played like every other song before I like as many other things as I could do before I finally was like, fuck it. And just like powered through it for like whatever it is, like 3.5 minutes. It's not even like a long song.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but it's not worth that 3.5 minutes of your life. I kind of felt similarly about that fucking Foghat song.
Yeah.
I hate that song. No disrespect to people who like the song, but for whatever reason, I had a similar, not to that extreme, but I was like, I don't want to have to play. Not my favorite.
There's a thing that we stole from Steve Albini, where whenever he's talking about music, he just says it's listener error, like it's my fault, like and so it's the biggest case of listener error there for me, because I just am. I don't. It hits my ears the wrong way. I have cilantro ears for Pat Benatar.
Cilantro ears. That's a good. I like that. Also like to imagine that when Pat shows up to serenade you in between rounds of playing "Hit Me with Your Best Shot," she's saying shit like, people like this song, or like, this one charted.
Yeah, she's reading like the chart history and like the Spotify stream numbers and like how much, because like how like residual checks for that song specifically. Yeah,
and you're just getting into arguments with Pat about like that doesn't correlate to like me enjoying the song, and you're just and then we cut away and everybody is just in the room watching you argue with like an invisible entity. It could be good. It's a good idea.
I think that's a good one. Yeah,
it's a good idea. Wow. Well, Niall, I think that about covers it for this one. I just got to say, I really love this story.
Yeah, it's a good one.
If I find out any more about Maureen, I promise I will let the podcast know. So.
Fantastic. So do you want to take care of some business?
Absolutely.
All right. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on facebook.com/itgetsweirdpodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're almost certainly there.
Blue Sky, we're there at It Gets Weird. Check it out. The preferred option over Twitter. So give us a follow there. Twitch.tv/itgetsweird. Hopefully going to be doing some more of that streaming soon. Life has been crazy busy lately, and I've been in and out of town. So we're going to get back to streaming real soon. Colin and I were playing Elden Ring Night Rain. We'll probably get back to Pokemon real soon as well, because we were playing Pokemon on there. So come give us a follow. It's a lot of fun to hang out and, talk to chat and stuff. Email us, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. We love getting your emails. We've gotten some really great emails over the years, and we are always happy to receive some more. So go ahead and hit us up there. Send us a cool story, send us an interesting fact, or, maybe, honestly, the thing that I can't believe we've never gotten is somebody telling us, hey, you got this fact about a UFO story wrong. So if you ever find something, you're like, hey, you missed this, let me know.
Yeah, we've gotten some pronunciation corrections.
Yeah, and you know what? Frankly, I don't care about that one. You don't have to. If you're like, oh shit, they pronounced this word wrong, honestly, skip it. Don't even bother. But if you got a good story, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. We have such great listeners, I gotta say.
It's true.
And we've heard some great stories. So please hit us up. Just let us know how we should address you, and send that email over to, once again, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. But finally, best way you can support us, most important way you can support us, patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a couple tiers there. $1 tier. That's the tip tier. You're just saying, hey, here's $1. Thanks for doing what you do. But at the $2 tier, you're going to get bonus content. You get It Gets Weird TV, where right now Niall and I are discussing The X-Files Season 3, some of the best episodes of the series. It's been a blast. Go check it out. That comes out every other week on Patreon. And then at the $5 tier, in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV, you're going to be getting World of Weird, where Niall and I get to talk about whatever the fuck we want to talk about. We go really off the rails and talk about anything that's on our minds. So go ahead and check that out. At the $5 tier, you're getting bonus content every single week. Either tier, you're going to be getting a huge back catalog of content. You'll have hundreds of episodes to listen to. It's a great value, I guess. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday on your own private Patreon feed. And you get access to the Discord, where we're hanging out, chatting with listeners. And guess what? I fucking fixed Discord connectivity because of a stupid thing. Don't worry about it. If you sign up, you should have access to a thing on your Patreon account that says, hey, here's your Discord benefit. Click here, lets you into the server. If that somehow still doesn't work, it should now. But if that doesn't, and you sign up after hearing this episode, let me know. Shoot us a message through Patreon. We'll try and get you hooked up and make sure things are working right. So please, donate to the Patreon. It's the best way to support us. It really helps. I feel like we say this every couple episodes, but like, the reason this show can continue going, the reason that in the past this show upgraded its quality, is all because of Patreon donors. It's all because of you folks out there listening and donating to us. So we really, really sincerely appreciate it. So please check it out. But if you can't donate, if money's tight, tell people about us. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for continuing to support the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.